Happy Bloomsday! I'm Elizabeth Fuller, the librarian at the Rosenbach, here to tell you a bit about what makes our Bloomsday unique, which is the presence of the manuscript of Ulysses. Joyce had already been working on Ulysses for 4 years when it began to be published in installments in the New York magazine The Little Review in March 1918, and he was only halfway through writing it. By the middle of 1920, he was in serious financial trouble, but fortunately the Little Review's financial backer, John Quinn, an Irish-American lawyer who was a collector and patron of writers and artists, offered to buy the manuscript from him as a way of subsidizing the work. Several months later, the magazine had to stop publishing after the content of some episodes got the publishers arrested for sending obscene material through the mail. After this, Joyce had no hope of finding another publisher in the English-speaking world, but Sylvia Beach, an American expatriate who ran the Shakespeare and Company bookshop in Paris, where he was then living, agreed to take on the project, and the first complete edition was published in 1922. The next year, Quinn began selling his library at a series of auctions. Our co-founder, Dr. A.S.W. Rosenbach, was by then acknowledged as the world's leading rare book dealer, and as a scholar of literature, he knew that this was one of the world's great books. Others at the sale weren't as perceptive, and he was able to buy it in 1924 for just $1,975, less than the reserve price. He brought it home to Philadelphia, and it's been here ever since. Since we can't invite you into the building to see the manuscript, as we usually do on Bloomsday, let's have a brief digital look. It can be tricky to explain briefly just what this manuscript is and how it relates to the published book. It contains a complete version of every episode, but the text is substantially different from the final version, and every episode has a different textual history. The early ones were first published in magazine form, and he took time to revise them again for the book. The last episodes were written as he was getting close to his self-imposed deadline and didn't go through as many drafts. Joyce's typical working method was to make a first draft in a notebook and revise it heavily. When he was satisfied for the time being, he made a clean copy on loose sheets of paper and sent it to a typist. He then made further changes by hand to the typed copy and sent it to the printer. After the printer set it in type, they'd send him proofs, which authors are just supposed to review to catch errors, but Joyce continued to revise and to add new material. About a third of the whole text was added at the proof stage. The result is that some of the best-known features of the book aren't present in the manuscript. Here's part of Ulysses in the first edition, with the headlines that set off each brief section of the text. Here's the same passage in the manuscript, which doesn't yet have them. He still hadn't thought of them when the Little Review was published. It wasn't until he got the proofs back that he began adding them, as well as more text. In most of the early episodes, the manuscript is close to what's known as fair copy, a version that's written out clean without changes, even when, as we've seen, he made extensive changes later on in other places. But with the last 2 episodes in particular, he just ran out of time, a nightmare for the typists, but a great treasure for us because we can see much more of his thought process. The manuscripts of Ithaca and Penelope are still in the notebook stage. He never got as far as copying them out onto separate sheets. In addition to the changes within the basic text, which he wrote on the right-hand page, he began adding more text in its left margin, and then when he ran out of room there, another layer on the left-hand page. And as usual, he added still more on the proofs. If he hadn't decided the book had to be published by his 40th birthday, I think he'd still be writing it. Speaking of running out of time, it's time to get back to the readings. We look forward to seeing you in person when we reopen. In the meantime, if you have a question about the manuscript, or anything else in the collections, you can find more information or ask us a question on the research section of the website. Now on with the show.